Hi there! If this is your first time here, welcome to the Parenthood and Relationship Podcast. I'm your host, Markella Kaplani, a psychologist, a parenthood and relationship coach, and a parent myself. Together, we explore the transformative journey of parenthood and its profound impact on our relationship with ourselves, our partners, and our children, so that we can be present and show up as we envision without having to do more. Let's get into today's episode. Hello and welcome back to the final episode of our series on cultivating compassion in parenthood, nurturing ourselves, our partner, and our children. Today, we're going to talk about building a compassionate family culture. In our previous episodes, we explored 1, the basics of compassion, what it is, what it isn't, and why it's important. Then we talked about self-compassion. In the 3rd episode, we talked about compassionate communication with our partners. And in the 4th, we talked about how we can model compassionate behavior for our children. And now, in this 5th, final episode, it's time to bring all of these elements together and talk about how we can create a family culture that is rooted in compassion. So let's get comfortable and dive into this essential topic together. As I started thinking about what to talk about specifically in this episode, I remembered this client of mine and how she shared with me that growing up, her family had a tradition of sharing highs and lows during dinner. Each person would talk about the best and the worst part of their day. I'm sure you've seen this before. Maybe your family had this tradition too. This simple practice helped them connect. It helped them understand each other's experiences and offer support where needed. It was a small but significant way to build a compassionate family culture. And why is that? It's because if we don't have something already set up as the norm, as that tradition, then it might be much more difficult for us to reach out and to ask for support and to offer compassion and to believe that we will be met with compassion as well. What this simple practice did is that it created a culture where in that family you knew that you were important, that your experience is important, that expressing your feelings is significant, and that people are there to listen. And so even in that kind of a setting, it might not be easy to show up every time and share the deepest things and the deepest struggles, but the fact that it is there and it is the way that we interact with one another, it really helps us know to our bone, to be convinced, to trust that there is the intention of a compassionate approach. There is the intention to show up with compassion for one another. Just like if there isn't that type of family culture, if we've grown up in a family where emotions are treated with disgust and like they're this annoyance, something that gets in the way. If we grow up in an environment where people dismiss feelings and invalidate them and think, oh my God, just get over it. Come on, not even in an aggressive way. I'm even speaking about family culture where there's this toxic positivity where everything is going to be all right. Come on, let's get over it. And then problems start to arise and we start to understand the importance of compassion and we want to set this up for our family culture. When this whole process begins, the intention might be there, the skills may be being used, there may be consistency even, but until a significant amount of time passes and there are several opportunities to really practice compassion, when there's a need that arises, when there is an issue that requires us to act with compassion and not fall back into old habits of, let's say, toxic positivity, we will still lack the trust and we will not reap the full benefits of all those compassionate practices that we're putting in place because the trust is lacking. And so I brought up that example of my old client because in looking at it from the outside, I realized that the benefits were so much bigger than what they might seem. They're not only short-term, they're also long-term, and they run deep. Today, I feel inspired to carry on that tradition with my own family. So I'm hoping that this will be inspiring for you to have this or some other form of tradition with your own family that promotes active listening and compassion and communication and expression of feelings so that it becomes the norm. And then it is so much easier when times are tough, when kids enter adolescence, when you want to connect, that this is the kind of thing that we do. So let's take a step back and define what a compassionate family culture actually looks like. It's a family environment where kindness, empathy, and support are at the core of our interactions. It's a space where everyone feels valued, heard, understood. In a compassionate family culture, mistakes are met with understanding and conflicts are resolved with empathy. Love is expressed openly and often. And a small parenthesis here, if that is something that resonates with you, it is a good idea that if you haven't already been introduced to the topic of love language, you and your partner take the quiz. You can Google it and find it online, but I can also have it in the show notes. You can take the love language test, see what kind of love language you have, how you express love and how you like to receive love. And if you read up enough on the different profiles, even if your children are young, you're going to start to realize what their love language is and start to take into consideration how everyone within the family feels that affection. So beyond this definition, what are steps that we can do to create a compassionate environment? One of them would be that tip that I just gave you about the love languages, so that we can know one another well and we can more actively and more consciously, more mindfully show up for one another, demonstrating our love and our affection in a way that it will be received. Another way is to set family values. We can start by discussing and defining our family values. What qualities do you want to emphasize in your family? If it's kindness, respect, empathy, and support, it's really important that you also have what we talked about in the previous episode, house rules. And I know that sounds very strict, but you get what I mean. The house values, the things that we do, the way we show up for one another, you have that as a way that you function. And you make sure that everyone in the family understands and agrees on these values. To create a compassionate environment, we can also encourage family members to practice empathy by considering each other's feelings and perspectives. This can be as simple as asking, how do you think your sibling feels right now? Or what can we do to help mom or dad feel a little better? When my son is having a bad day, I ask him, would a hug make it a little bit better? What would you like me to do so that you feel held? And so there are a lot of times that he will see me a little bit grumpy. You may have heard in that other episode that there was one day that for some reason, whatever that may be, I woke up and I was a bit snappy. And then I understood that and I expressed it to him and I apologized. And he said, sure, I forgive you, but why? But in saying that, what I didn't mention is that he also came and he hugged me because that is something that he's seen us do. So there's the hug, and within that, there's also the encouragement of open communication where I described my feeling and he asked a clarifying question and then he communicated his love with a hug. So we can foster an environment where everyone feels comfortable to express their thoughts and feelings. They feel safe. And this can happen through regular family meetings, which can be a great way to ensure that everyone has a voice. It can happen like in those dinners where you have that 5-minute discussion where everyone takes turns to talk about their day, their highs and their lows. During these kinds of occurrences, you can discuss any issues or concerns and work together to find solutions. But when children are younger, it is a bit more difficult to get them in that mode. So in my family, we don't hold meetings, not just yet at least. But we always use the opportunity to talk about our feelings and to give every person a voice, to address any issues or concerns. And so we model that open communication. It's really important that we make it a habit to express gratitude and appreciation for one another. An example of that would be when my son came up to me the other day and said, I'm really angry and I'm really angry with you. And before I asked why he's angry and before I asked what I can do about it or what I have done to elicit that kind of emotion in him, I made sure to say thank you for telling me. Thank you for expressing your emotion. Whether it's a simple thank you for doing the dishes, acknowledging someone's effort in a family project, or expressing gratitude that they were vulnerable and they told you what they're feeling. Showing appreciation reinforces positive behavior and it strengthens the bond. It strengthens the trust that you want to instill so that this is long lasting. The trust that it is safe to be vulnerable, to express emotions, and that I will be held and not judged and not yelled at and not dismissed. Because a lot of times there isn't so much the yelling, but it's the dismissal of feelings that causes the lack of trust that I can open up and I can be kind and I can be compassionate, or that I will be met with kindness and compassion. As I'm speaking about this, I'm thinking of two things that I definitely want to make sure that I mention. One of them is how we can incorporate compassion into daily life. What are small or big things that we can be doing, and we can be setting up the stage, setting up the habits that will make compassion something that is family culture. But also, I'm thinking that you might be wondering, okay, what happens when there's conflict? What happens when we are in a difficult phase? What happens when there are challenges? How can we maintain a family culture of compassion? And this is not an either or. I want to do both. So let's start by integrating compassion into our daily routines and activities. For one, you can plan activities that promote compassion and teamwork. This could be volunteering together, like we said. You can play cooperative games. You can work on a family project. Things like that. These activities, they provide opportunities to practice compassion and strengthen your family bond. Then again, like we mentioned before, you want to make sure that you have these traditions and these rituals that emphasize compassion. This could be a weekly gratitude circle. So like I always tell you to keep a gratitude journal. You will not expect that of your children necessarily, unless we're talking about older kids. But you could have a gratitude circle where each person shares something that they're thankful for. We don't have to wait for Thanksgiving to do that. Or a monthly kindness challenge where everyone tries to perform one act of kindness each day. These are both fun and effective. Then you can have those daily check-ins like at dinner, where you take time each day to check in with each family member, to ask about their day, to listen to their experiences, to offer support. This can be done during mealtime, before bed, or during car rides. And I want to take a step back here and say, when I'm talking about family culture, you might be inclined, or it might be automatic, to think of your interaction with your children. But this includes your interaction with your spouse, with your partner, which not only affects the family dynamic, but it is something that your children notice even if you think they're not. So in that same way, this daily check-in is not just about learning what the children did all day at school and hearing what they're feeling, but we want to make sure that we're doing it with each other. I am doing it with my partner as well, in front of the children where they can see we are modeling this behavior, because otherwise it seems like we're only expecting them to say things, or that we are practicing compassion and kindness and sharing of feelings only in terms of relating to them, but not with one another. And that creates a gap. And wherever there is a gap, there's an opportunity for fear to creep in, for doubt, for mistrust. So you want to make sure that these daily check-ins also happen with your husband, with your wife, with your spouse, with your partner, whoever. And I'm going to go as far as to say you might be having those daily check-ins over the phone with your partner because that's not something that you get to do all day. And it's something that you do with your children while your partner is still at work, let's say. The way that you relate to one another with your partner at the times that you guys are all together as a family will reflect whether you do check in and whether you have a compassionate communication with one another to the kids. So maybe they don't get a chance to see you do these check-ins. Maybe the tradition isn't followed as wholly as we are describing, wholly with a W, as we are describing here. Maybe that's not possible for the way that your family is set up, for your schedules and all these things. That's also fine. Just so you know, there is a different way that we relate to one another when we are doing well, our kids will pick up on, and a different way that we relate to one another when we're not well. Because when you're not checking in with your partner's feelings, when there is a gap in the communication, when you're only talking about parenting stuff and logistics and household issues, that distance that there is between you and them in terms of an emotional level, it is felt. Closing that parentheses, one final thing I can propose is that we foster compassionate responses. When a family member is upset or they're struggling, respond with compassion. Offer a listening ear, a comforting hug, or words of encouragement. Show them that they're not alone and that their feelings matter. And now I want to go to handling conflicts and challenges, because these are inevitable in any family, but handling them with compassion can make a huge difference. Tip number 1 is to stay calm. When conflicts arise, because they will and they do, try to stay calm and composed. Take a few deep breaths before responding, because that will help prevent the escalation of the issue and of the emotions, and it promotes a more thoughtful response. It also teaches everyone in the family the way that we can handle situations, the way that we can avoid going into defense mode, and effective communication skills, really, social skills. It really is an opportunity for all of that. Then we can make sure to listen to each other's perspective without interrupting, validating everyone's feelings by acknowledging their emotions. And then, like we've said in previous episodes several times, it's really important to listen and to validate, to hear the person out, listen to their perspective, not interrupt, validate feelings by acknowledging the emotion. Whether we see it as irrational or rational, whether we see it as fair or unfair, it's important to say, I understand you're feeling XYZ because, and reflect back. It's also really important that we find solutions together where everyone can pitch in and everyone can agree on the final decision, on the final solution. We can encourage each other, each family member, to contribute ideas and to be open to compromise, because we also demonstrate how we are compromising. This collaborative approach fosters a sense of teamwork and mutual respect. And finally, along those lines, it's really important that we encourage one another, and we do it ourselves as well, to apologize when we've hurt someone and to forgive when we've been hurt. This helps to heal rifts and to restore harmony in the family. And all of this put together creates that family culture of compassion. Because like every family, we are going to have conflicts. We are going to have tension. We are not going to always be kind to one another. But if we set up the intention and the traditions and the rituals, and we really are mindful and conscious of approaching one another with this kind of trust, with the openness to vulnerability, with the intention to embrace one another, then in the long term, we are going to reap so many benefits. Children who grow up in compassionate environments, like I said in the previous episode, they develop strong social skills. They have positive relationships. They know how to handle conflict in relationships. They assert themselves. They have confidence. They have greater emotional well-being overall. They can handle conflict effectively. They can show empathy toward others. They can be a valuable member to the community, to the world. They can know that they matter. But even for us as parents, a compassionate family culture will create a supportive and nurturing environment. It will strengthen the bond with our children and with one another, with each other as partners. It will reduce our stress, and it will foster a sense of belonging and connection. That overarching trust can help us feel safe. It's so important that all family members feel safe. This provides a strong foundation for dealing with life's challenges and the uncertainties and all the waves and changes and phases that are bound to happen as our children grow and as we keep on changing along with them. So this series has come to its end. In closing this episode, I want to wrap up by saying that building a compassionate family culture is about creating an environment where kindness, empathy, and support are at the core of our interactions, promoting trust and safety. By setting family values, by practicing empathy, encouraging open communication, and incorporating compassion into daily life, we can create a nurturing and supportive family environment that can take any hit, that can withstand the storm of constant change and the chaos, because love and trust and safety are at the foundation of it all. Thank you so much for joining me today and throughout this entire series. I hope that you found this episode helpful and inspiring. If you did, I would love to know your thoughts, and it would be such an honor to receive your positive review on Apple Podcasts so that I know that this is valuable, I know that you appreciate it, and I can continue creating content like this. Don't forget to tune in for more episodes. I'm very excited for what's to come in September. You haven't heard it within this series, but I do want to hype you up because starting September, I am going to be incorporating one monthly episode where I have a guest come in and talk about her or his experience in parenthood with several benefits. Two of the most important being A, that you will feel heard and that you will see you truly are not alone. And B, that in those cases where there is room for coaching and we apply certain strategies, you can see how they are applied in real time. Those things that I talk about in other episodes, you can see how they're put into action in a real case study that you hear live. If you would like to be that one person that comes on anonymously or not, please know that it would be my honor and my pleasure to have you come on here and talk about your experience and explore together how it is that parenthood is treating you, how you might be changing, how your partner, your relationship is changing, how it may be affecting your philosophy about life, about work, how you may be showing up for your kids, how you may want to be showing up for your kids, and what strategies we can implement in your case that could move the needle. This is an actual opportunity to have a free coaching session with me. So if you don't want to miss this opportunity, you can make sure to go down to the show notes or the description wherever you hear this podcast, and you can apply by sending me an email at info@markelakaplani.com with the subject line of podcast guest, at which point I will send you a form to fill out and we will take it from there. Again, thank you for joining me through this series, for having me in your earbuds. Oh, and I didn't mention your journal. If you want to apply what we discussed in this episode, one way would be to consider how it is that you want to foster compassion in your family culture, what values it is that you and your partner share and that you want to instill in your children, and what kind of ritual or tradition you can start setting up so that you foster openness in communication and in the expression of feelings, trust, compassion, kindness. As always, I am here to listen to your feedback, to your comments, to how this went. You can find me on Instagram at markella.kaplani. You can email me. You can comment on YouTube. So don't be a stranger and make sure you tune in for more episodes on parenthood, parenting, and raising happy children, along with those special guest coaching interviews that I mentioned. Until then, take care of yourself, take care of each other, be kind, be forgiving, be compassionate. And remember, you're doing an amazing job.